Shooters. A genre that never seemed to fall out of popularity. A genre of game that comes in many different gunpowder flavors such as hero shooters, looter shooters, boomer shooters, movement shooters, and the list goes on and on like a list of made-up music genres. The fuck is cringe pop? But before all these newfangled titles and game mechanics found in recent times, speeding up the gameplay to ludicrously high speeds like that of Apex and various other titles, the gameplay for shooters back then were much simpler, that being between the years 2000 and 2007. But instead of looking at all the different genres of shooters of those years, let's narrow it down to a specific focus, that being first-person shooters. Outside of the story for these games, without all the previously mentioned mechanics and gimmicks due to the limited technology of the time, for a majority of the shooters, it was the pure gunplay that had to carry these games of these years. Because if the story sucked, but the gunplay was good, it can kinda carry the game through, but the same can't be said for the vice versa of that. Just ask this guy. But this genre alone was able to spawn a lot of beloved titles for years to come, like Halo, Call of Duty, Time Splitters, and Shadow the Hedgehog. Why did Sega even make this game? But with all great things, there will always be the losers and underdogs. But it's here that you might find some diamonds in the rough. Some titles like Dark Watch, where you play the cowboy turned vampire Jericho Cross, accidentally releasing the all-powerful vampire Lord Lazarus from his containment after a botched train robbery, joining the titular Dark Watch to stop him. With a plot like that, it's a wonder how it sat under the radar for many people during its release. But that wonder is quickly dashed away after you see its competition.
That's rough, buddy.
But there is one game released in 2006, a shooter that maybe, possibly, not really, could have been the Call of Duty Modern Warfare before its inception. A game that took its shooting so seriously that the plot was just an afterthought, among other things, but in my opinion was the aforementioned diamond in the rough. So how about we take a nostalgia trip back to the good old year of 2006 to see what that game was, shall we?
Take a deep breath.
Storm Area 51.
President should be
What a fucking
drag a Xbox One.
To number 9.
Brain blast!
Black. Released on February 24, 2006. Developed by Criterion Games for both Xbox and PlayStation 2, was a single-player first-person shooter, and was pretty straightforward with its delivery of gameplay. Not really doing anything that would break the mold of the FPS formula. You grab some guns, you shoot everything that moves, finish the mission, rinse and repeat. But it did have a few tricks up its sleeve when it came to the details and visuals. I remember playing this in my younger years and having my mind blown away from the spectacle of explosions and bullets happening in front of me, and looking at it now, it held up pretty well visually. So much so that I'm surprised that my PS2 wasn't sputtering and smoking from trying to process the carnage.
I love you. Both of you.
We love you too.
Especially when it came to the destructive elements of the environment. Take that, Battlefield doing this back in 06, baby. Oh. For the story side of things, the length of the game isn't exactly long either. Spanning over only 8 missions, it's about a 5 to 6 hour affair, and with no other game modes available outside of the story, there was little reason to replay it outside of getting all the collectibles. But for a game like this any longer, and it definitely would have overstayed its welcome. Looking at the story, or the lack of, it puts you in the shoes of Jack Keller, a CIA Black Ops operative who has no regards for orders and is under interrogation from an unknown CIA higher up about his blatant disregard of them and his recollection of events about his mission against the notorious terrorist organization 7th Wave. Now, given that this was released in 2006 and a shooter involving military and terrorists, where would you think this took place? I'll give you a hint. That's right, Russia. The game has you running through Ingushetia? Fuck. And Chechnya, I think I got that one right, to hunt down the elusive William Lennox, which ultimately leads up to how you killed him. Or at least so you thought. Outside of gameplay, the plot is mainly delivered through cutscenes played in between missions by the actors Marty Papazian, Jack Keller, known for his role as Anthony in the movie Least Among Saints, and Paul Pape, the unknown CIA interrogator, known for his role in... And that's about it for the story.
Done. Pow. Finished.
Like I said before, the game story isn't exactly long and complex. To dive any deeper would be like dipping a stick into a shallow puddle. It doesn't really deliver a hard-hitting narrative that'll leave you thinking after beating it, and for all intents and purposes, it wasn't really trying to. Hilariously enough, as stated by the game's director Alex Ward, his initial idea for the story was for a radio playstyle voiceover spoken over a black screen. The story took that much of a backseat, because the front seat belonged to the action on screen, baby.
Hello there.
Now we get to the real meat and potatoes of the game, the gameplay and everything in between. First, the gameplay. As I previously hammered home about, the gameplay is about as basic as an FPS can get. So much so that in order to get the most out of the gunplay, they removed your ability to jump. I think I've seen this somewhere before actually. The HUD has also been stripped down to its bare essentials, only keeping in view your health bar, damage indicator, your grenade and medkit inventory, and your current magazine and reserve ammunition. Minimap, waypoint indicator, mission log that hangs out on the side of your screen? Fuck no, throw those in the trash. And much like other FPSs, you're only allowed to carry around 2 weapons, making you think about which guns you should take or leave, weighing out the pros and cons between them. And with 16 weapons to choose from, those ranging from 3 handguns, 2 shotguns, 4 SMGs, 3 assault rifles, 1 sniper, 1 machine gun, and 2 explosive projectile weapons, you've got a decent list to pick from. Or at least that would be the case if it wasn't for the fact that there's only a small handful of weapons available per level, and some weapons are even locked behind specific ones, such as the P90, which isn't available until the 4th mission of the game and forgotten thereafter. But how the game makes up for this is by giving almost every weapon an absurd amount of ammo in every magazine, because if you're reloading, you're not shooting. And a massive reserve ammunition carry capacity, so that you have no need to switch weapons and keep that trigger held down. But most importantly, making each weapon feel and sound damn good to shoot. More on the sounds in a bit. A neat little thing that they also did was give the weapons a fire selector, allowing you to switch between single, burst, and automatic fire, giving you the ability to either use single fire to carefully line up your shots like some kind of nerd, use the purgatory between single and auto that is burst fire like some kind of psychopath, or playing the game the way it was intended with full auto. But there are 2 things I have a bit of a problem with when it comes to the weapons. The first being that this game lacks traditional iron sights. Instead, the screen just kind of zooms in as if you stretched your neck forward. Kinda weird coming from a game that's all about its guns. The second is this blur effect that happens when you reload, which is used to simulate depth of field or something to that effect, but to see it every single time when reloading can be annoying. But it's just a small personal nitpick and can be curbed if you tap the X button, if you're on Xbox, while reloading. As for enemy types, there are only 3 that you deal with. The normal foot soldier, who utilizes weapons ranging from assault rifles to RPGs, the mass soldiers, who use shotguns to deal massive damage up close and have body armor in both the chest and face to tank a lot of damage in order to close that distance, and shield wielding enemies, who utilize SMGs and magnums. Another thing to note is that thanks to the extended magazines of every weapon, even standard enemies can take a punishing amount of damage, but as per usual, a single shot to an exposed head will take down almost anyone. The masked enemies have to be shot in the back of the head for the single shot takedown. Now this is the part where I talk about how thanks to the staggering amount of enemy variety, the game really makes you think about how to approach a fight, forcing you to use different strategies to complete a level, but the AI isn't exactly the smartest around. Yeah, they make you take cover every now and then, but with how generous health pickups are, you can just patch up any damage done without stressing on medical resources. And more importantly, there's never really a time where you're put in a situation where you run out of ammo because every enemy basically uses the same weapon as you. Like in the mission Veratska Dockyard, you start with a MAC-10 Elite, and oh, would you look at that, everyone just so happens to have a MAC-10 Elite. Did we just meet up somewhere and agree on the weapon of the day? Even after all that, the only enemy that you would think would give you trouble, the shield enemies, you can just throw one round boy at them, or just blast their shields apart if you plug enough bullets into them. Shows how useful they are. All in all, you can just blaze through levels if you just shoot in their general direction enough without any real need for planning and strategy. Funny enough, it seems like they did want to implement an option for stealth due to the silencers available in the game, but they work for a solid 2 seconds until the eagle-eyed AI just lock onto you, even if you don't fire a bullet, making the silencers and any plan of stealth flat out worthless, silencers being more of a cosmetic item for your gun. To add insult to injury, they actually make your weapons deal less damage, so... Now we talked about the story, the enemies, and the gameplay, so let's get into those nifty little details, shall we? But before we continue any further, I want to declassify something. At the beginning of the video I said this. But with all great things, there will always be the losers and underdogs. In Black's case, neither of those were exactly true.
Move this man!
In fact, it was overall praised and received favorable reviews from critics at the time, even being nominated for Best Audio at the 2006 BAFTA Video Game Awards, and won Best Art and Sound jointly with Burnout Revenge, another game by Criterion, at the 2006 Development Industry Excellence Awards. The amount of detail, particle effects, and destructible environments that they were able to shove into this game was both incredible and created for some cinematic-worthy moments. Moreover, this game came out a few months after the official release of the Xbox 360, that release being on November 22nd, 2005. Now this game was already in development, so stopping midway to develop it for the clearly more powerful console was kind of out of the question. Could it have been possible? Maybe. But they stuck to their guns and full sent it for the PS2 and original Xbox, and in retrospect, that was probably the better choice. But what they managed to create was pretty jaw-dropping, squeezing out every ounce of power they could from those consoles to make the explosive-filled masterpiece that was Black. Now when I say explosive-filled, I mean explosive-filled. Just about anything that isn't a human being, but don't think they're excluded, pretty much explodes in just a few bullets. Hidden intel, boxes, cars, buildings, all of it. And while we're on the topic of explosions, the destructibility available in this game is really impressive. Hitting a building with an RPG and watching all the glass break and fall, followed up by a sequence of explosions that trail up, down, and across it was definitely badass to see. A nice example of this is the tower in the first level. All of this carnage is further complemented by all the dust and debris that kicks up during intense firefights, making for something straight out of an action film. And looking further into that, like all good things, it's in the finer details. While a lot of these details aren't exactly game defining, it's pretty cool that the developers even took the time to add these things in, showing that a lot of time, care, and effort was put into this game, something we don't see often nowadays. For starters, guns in this game have physical length. What I mean by this is that in most FPSs, when you approach a wall, the character never lowers his weapon or shifts it in any way. Instead, the gun just phases through said wall. But here the weapon is pulled back as you approach it and can even shatter windows if it passes through and is long enough. For example, the MAC-10. It's small and stubby, so passing by a window won't do anything, but add a suppressor and it's not just the terrorists that have to worry about you.
No. Wait.
Another thing about the weapons is when you switch between weapons, your character will fiddle with the gun in some way. Whether it's doing a brass check like with the DC-3 Elite, or racking around into the chamber like the AK-47, the animation will always play. But when under fire, it'll skip it entirely, giving you that sense of urgency that maybe playing with your gun at that moment isn't the best idea. And when it comes to the enemies, the way they react to being hit and killed was kind of fun to see. They were even given different death animations depending on where they were positioned. For example, if an enemy is hit and killed, they don't always just immediately fall to the floor. They'll do a spin, fall to their knees, and a variety of other things, but more importantly, there was a sense of weight behind it as opposed to just falling over and sprawling out like some kind of ragdoll. And if they're killed with a particularly powerful weapon, like the shotgun or the magnum, they're sent flying backwards. As for where they're positioned, if an enemy is killed near some railing, they'll fall over it and either grab onto it and desperately hold on for dear life, or just straight up fall over, firing their weapon wildly in the air. These animations made for some wacky shit that you'll see in, well, action films. And speaking of action films, some of the sounds used for the weapons, which we're finally getting to, were actually derived from various action shows and films. The DC-3 Elite having the same sounds as Jack Bauer's pistol in the show 24, the Uzi from the movie True Lies, and the MP5 from the movie Die Hard, just to name a few. But it wasn't these sounds that gave Black its well-deserved awards, but how much punch each weapon's sound was able to deliver. From the handguns to the explosive projectiles, all of them had a certain heft and authority to them that made it all the more satisfying to shoot. My personal favorite was the metallic sounding boom the shotguns had.
Nice!
But the developers also had a unique choice of sound design when it came to the enemy's weapons. According to them, they opted for a choir of guns approach. This meant that instead of just taking a weapon specific sound and pitch shifting it according to range, they would assign the enemy itself to have a voice, and much like a choir, the guns would have a low, medium, and a high pitch so that the sounds would blend neatly enough with the ongoing chaos and not just be a blare of explosions and random assortment of specific gun sounds that would otherwise just make the whole thing a noisy mess. But good sound design doesn't just stop with the weapons. The music the game has to offer is really well done. I'm no music expert, just watch this video and you'll see. And this is just my opinion, but what I can say about the music is it plays into the tense atmosphere of things, what with all the bombastic rising of all the instruments, and each song isn't that long, much like the game, each ranging within 2 to 3 minutes in length. The soundtrack sounds like something you would hear in an action film. There's plenty more small details this game has to offer, but that can be a separate video all on its own. All in all, Black was a game that was both highly regarded, but with time mostly forgotten, due to it not having anything particularly interesting worth remembering. Even looking at the reviews at the time, with all the praise it received, a major critique was that it was nothing more than a fancy tech demo at the end of the day. And for the most part, they were right. It didn't offer some great or even half decent story. It was fairly short and the gameplay wasn't anything to write home about. But as I said near the beginning of the video, the story took a backseat for the action on screen, and honestly, that could have been the entire review. The whole thing plays like a highly interactive action movie. What with some of the weapons and their sounds ripped directly from various action shows and films, the overemphasis on explosions and violence, and the minimal attention to story to boot. Could there have been more? Absolutely, but that wasn't exactly the goal here. There was no complexity needed, as the simple act of firing a gun at a couple of bad guys while everything around you exploded was the fun to be had. But any frustrations could have been remedied with its sequel that the cliffhanger ending was hinting at. But unfortunately, any chance of a sequel was shut down, its legacy to live on through body count as its spiritual successor. So while this game didn't have anything to anchor itself within the minds of the people for years to come, and its only major selling point was its graphics and the amount of particle effects it can shove in, it was one that did what a video game was supposed to do. Just be mindless fun. And if you never played it, it's one I highly recommend. To quote an article from 2005 by Eurogamer, it's being able to have fun with a gun in an empty room. And with that, the video is over. I want to say thank you to all of you who made it this far, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any criticisms of the video, please let me know in the comments below, as I'm still trying to get into the groove of things. Even though it's been 6 months, but yeah. Any and all criticisms are welcome. Thank you again, and I hope to see you in the next video. Peace.